true fiction came to me in a strange way. It was fortuitous. It was two elements. One was something I read, and one was a conversation I had. Lawrence Block wrote a column for Mystery Scene. I think it was for Mystery Scene, about a friend of his. I don't even remember the guy's name. Let's call him Roger Jones, an author he knew named Roger Jones, who was the author of the successful Augustus Flynn mystery series. And Roger Jones had been burglarized. Someone had broken into his apartment in New York and stolen a bunch of stuff, and the police weren't really following up on it. So Larry said, why don't you investigate it? Roger said, I'm an author. Why should I investigate it? Larry said, but you're the creator of Augustus Flynn. Tackle it the way Augustus Flynn would. And Roger said, I'm not Augustus Flynn. Yes, you are. Everything Augustus Flynn has done came from you. Roger said, yeah, but that's fiction. No, but the way he looks at the world, the way he thinks, the way he pieces clues together, you can do that. And Roger said, no, I can't. And that really frustrated Larry. And he was telling me about that. And then I was at a BoucherCon or Left Coast Crime. I was having dinner with Lee Child. And we were talking about Reacher and the movies and stuff. And I'm looking at Lee, and he's nothing like Reacher. Reacher could beat 6 guys up with a napkin and then go back to eating his dinner. He's nothing like the character he writes about, except that he's tall. But other than that, Lee Child looks like Roger Moore's younger brother. He's just not Reacher. And I think people expect him. And it reminded me of something that happened when I was writing my vigilante novels. The publisher sent me to a big book conference in San Francisco, and they had a dinner with all their other men's action adventure authors, people who are writing the Immolator and the Death Merchant and the Terminator and the Destroyer. And there are all these guys who looked really tough. They were tattooed and they had knives in their teeth, and they had, were still shell-shocked from Nam. And then I walk in, this college student, and they were mad at me, like, I read your book. It's clear you've never smelled brains on a wall. No, I haven't. What does it smell like? And they were like very disappointed that this geeky kid was in their sandbox where, they were, I've killed a man. How many of you killed? None. You need to kill to write about killing. So it was a strange experience. So all that kind of coalesced. And I thought, what if there was a writer who found himself in the kind of situation that he writes about, and the only way he can survive is to become the man he imagines every day at his computer? And that's where true fiction came in. And I thought, what if a guy who wrote Reacher had to be Reacher in order to survive? I mean, he doesn't have the physical skills or the actual experience, in military police, what have you, but he has the mindset, he has the attitude, the dialogue that Reacher says comes from him. Maybe he could pull it off. So I came up with true fiction, and I wrote it on spec and immediately sent it to Lee Child. He went, oh, this is great. this is my life, or what I fear my life could be. And so I actually sent it to a bunch of other thriller authors. I may have sent it to Jeff Deaver. I can't remember whether it was that one or the next one, but I sent my book to a lot of my author friends who were writing those kinds of characters. And then I sent the manuscript with blurbs already to publishers. And a lot of publishers turned it down, saying, I don't know how to market this. It's a spoof, but it's an actual spy novel. We don't know what we can do with it. And then Amazon Publishing, my good friends, said, oh, this is great. This would be a huge hit for us. And it was #1 on Amazon for 14 straight days when it came out. It's been a very big success. I learned an important lesson from Janet Ivanovich. And in some ways, I didn't follow that lesson with true fiction, even though that book was a bestseller. Janet is a firm believer that she wants the writing to disappear, that she doesn't want the writing to call attention to itself. If you're going to write something funny or clever, put it in a character's mouth. Let the character say it. Don't have the omniscient narrator say it, and write as little as possible in the prose. Just write what you need to set the scene. You often can summarize, find the one key detail in the room about the person, and that's all you need. Let the reader fill in the blanks. And that was an important lesson. But also, every book has its own voice, just like every TV show has its own rhythm or momentum or voice. And the amount of humor versus drama, you have to decide what balance you want to strike. True fiction was a really hard book to write because I wanted to write a kick-ass thriller, but I also wanted to make fun of kick-ass thrillers. I wanted to show how the sausage is made while actually delivering exactly what readers expect. So I didn't want the revelation of how we write these kind of books to take away from the pleasure of writing the books. So true fiction was a thriller, but it also had scenes from the writer's fake novels or his novels in the book. And I had the writer talking about the problems he was having living up to his fictional creation in the real world. In a way, it was hearkening back to themes I explored with The Man with the Iron-On Badge, AKA Watch Me Die. The conflict between reality and fiction and our expectations that we have based on the fictions we see and read. So true fiction was a balancing act, but the narration had a point of view, and there was smart ass stuff in the narration, in the third person omniscient narration of the book. And it was striking that balance of humor versus action versus drama and emotion. That was hard. And I ended up cutting a lot of humor. I would write lines that were very funny, and then I realized it took away from the emotion or took away from the suspense, and I had to cut it. And even though I had a mentor in my television life, Michael Gleason, who created Remington Steele, who said, and this is him talking, never cut funny. That's me doing a Michael Gleason impersonation. Never cut funny. In fact, I hear Michael in my head all the time. In fact, in this interview, you've seen me mimic Michael a lot. But anyway, never cut funny. Why cut funny? Because sometimes it undercut the drama I was going for. When I sat down to write Lost Hills, and I can talk more about that later, I intentionally wanted the authorial voice to disappear. I wanted just the facts, ma'am. I wanted the writing to disappear the way it does in a Janet Ivanovich, Lee Goldberg novel, but because I wanted the reader to focus on the story and the characters, to be caught up in their world and not be pulled out. And while there's humor in it, a lot less humor than I have in true fiction and other books I've written. And for a while, I was alternating between Ian Ludlow novels and Eve Ronin. She's a character in Lost Hills. So it was great. It was a palate cleanser. I'd finish the funny, action-packed Ian Ludlow novel and then take a weekend off and shift right to the police procedural Eve Ronin novel, and then finish the Eve Ronin novel and switch back to the action-adventure humor of an Ian Ludlow. And it kept me sharp. I wasn't stuck in one voice, one genre. In some ways, I don't know how Lee Child is able to do what he does. I don't think I could write one character, one world, one voice, and be happy doing that. Michael Connelly, in a way, is my goal as a writer. He writes all kinds of things, and they're all crime novels, basically police procedurals, but he writes standalone thrillers. He has the Ballard books, he has the Lincoln Lawyer, he has the Bloodwork books. Terry McCallum, is that the name? But he has Pete McAvoy, the reporter book. So he's able to shift gears and keep himself fresh. I want to be able to do the same thing. My 15 Monk novels were all written first person from the point of view of Monk's female assistant. And I really enjoyed that. And I come from a family of women. I was raised by a single mother. I have sisters. I'm married with a daughter. I'm surrounded by women. And it's important to me that women be portrayed accurately. I hate the way most men write women. The male gaze, all about boobs. It's all ridiculous. And it bothers me as a father, as a husband, as a brother. But I'm very attuned to the way women think and write. And of course, Janet Ivanovich and I teamed up, and the central character, or at least one of the central characters in our Fox and O'Hare books, is a woman. So I like writing from a woman's point of view. I think it keeps you fresh as well. And I hadn't intended to necessarily write a book from a woman's point of view after the 15 Monk novels or the books with Janet. I had an idea for a police procedural, and it wasn't even a sequel to King City. I had a different idea. And I have a lot of contacts in law enforcement, and I got invited to a homicide investigators training conference. Now, these are conferences that homicide investigators have to attend to stay current, to stay certified. In some states, you're required to attend 24 hours of education every year to keep your homicide investigator's badge. And I got invited to attend a homicide investigators training conference in Green Bay, Wisconsin, because a friend of mine ran that program. It's not open to civilians. So I fly out there to attend this conference, just hoping to get some details that might help me with the idea I have in mind. And I go there, and there are uniformed police officers attending, but also cops who are just wearing their guns and their badges. But guys who weren't wearing guns and badges, and women who just had the cop look and the cop stare. Then there's me. Hi. It's like, I clearly was not a cop. And it was like high school in a new city. You know, at breakfast, everyone was avoiding me because I was clearly something weird in the room. And there was a case presented by a lead investigator. It was a case that there was an example of why it's important when you go to a crime scene to approach it as if you've never solved a homicide before, to approach it like a homicide virgin, to lose all your preconceptions and common sense about homicides and look at it fresh. Because if you didn't, in this case wouldn't have been solved. So the lead investigator was there, the forensic investigators were there, the initial uniformed officers who were at the scene of this crime, the prosecutors who prosecuted the case. It was a day-long presentation on this particular case that defied homicide investigator common sense. And it was fascinating and gruesome and told in a way they were talking to other cops. So they weren't dumbing it down for me. I had to kind of figure out what they were talking about at times or look things up on the internet. But I asked lots of questions. It was in the dark, so they couldn't really see me. I'm asking lots of questions about the case. And during the break, I went up to the lead investigator and asked him more questions. And he said, your questions are terrific. May I ask what law enforcement agency you're with? I said, yeah, I'm a senior investigator with the WGA. He said, I'm not familiar with that agency. I said, Writers Guild of America. He said, you're a fucking writer? Yes. How the hell did you get in here? And I pointed to the guy who runs the program, said, Jim's a friend of mine. He looked over at Jim, saw Jim grinning at him, looked back at me. Well, if he likes you, I like you. And your questions are great. So you know what? Keep asking questions. And so, but while I had this animated conversation with the investigator, other people in the room saw it and saw, oh, the cool guy is talking to the weird, creepy, geeky guy. I guess the geeky guy is okay. So then at lunch, then people actually were chatting with me. And then at dinner, we were all stuck in the same hotel for this seminar. I bought everybody drinks. So then they went, oh, the Hollywood guy has an open credit account. Let's go have drinks on him and also tell him our war stories. Maybe he'll option us. So I was very popular then. But when I went to bed that night, I couldn't get the case out of my head. How could I do that case when it's the requirement, the essential requirement is abandon everything you know about being a homicide detective? Well, what if I had a homicide detective who knew nothing? Well, that's not realistic because to become a homicide detective, you need to work your way up. It's a job you get through experience and skill. Well, what if I have a character who gets it without experience and skill? He would have a real handicap. Well, then I thought, you know what? I'm sick and tired of these middle-aged detectives who are brilliant. No one understands them, and they're drunks or have addictions, or their family was killed by a serial killer. What if I had a 25-year-old woman, who gets this job because of a YouTube video or something, you know, and she doesn't deserve to be there. So she's a woman, she's young, she's leapfrogged over all these people, and she's in this horrible homicide she's got to solve. Well, suddenly the character of Eve Ronin came to me by virtue of the story. The story dictated the character. And by morning, and I didn't sleep that night, she was fully formed in my head. And I threw out the book that I was going to write. And I knew I was going to write a fictionalized version of this case. So I spent the next day tracking down all the people who'd given that presentation and interviewing them at length. And then letting them know I was going to write a book based on it, move it to LA and change things. Could I talk to them about it? And they went, yeah. They didn't believe I was going to do it. And I did it. I mean, that book was a wonderful experience. I took that real case, and the case is bizarre, and people read Lost Hills and think, oh, he must have made this stuff up. No, the wildest things about the case I didn't put in, and the wildest things that are in the book are real. And it was great. It was a wonderful experience, and the book was a big success. Avoid the cliches. I wanted to write a police procedural. You know how many police procedurals there have been? I mean, going back to the 87th Precinct by Ed McBain, but you've also got all the Joseph Wambaugh novels. You've got Michael Connelly. You've got Ian Rankin. You got the Kellermans. I mean, what the hell am I going to do that's different and fresh? And until you know what that is, don't write it. Because everyone has read the middle-aged detective who's overcoming his addiction, who's haunted by the murder of his family, who's got a divorce, and he's brilliant, but his bosses don't appreciate him. He's always battling the politics. Been there, done that. And if you do it in Los Angeles, what are you going to do that Joseph Wambaugh and Michael Caine haven't done better already? So when I came up with Eve Ronin, I knew there hadn't been a 25-year-old female homicide detective. Maybe there had, but not in Los Angeles. And LA's been written about to death. You know, Raymond Chandler and Dashiell, well, Dashiell was San Francisco, but you know, it's been done to death. What new perspective am I going to have on LA? I put Eve Ronin in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and I assigned her to the Lost Hills Station. Lost Hills is a jurisdiction, an island in the midst of metropolitan Los Angeles that's surrounded by Ventura County, LA, Woodland Hills, but also by different geography. The Lost Hills jurisdiction includes the Santa Monica Mountains, Malibu, Calabasas, Hidden Hills, Topanga Canyon. It's all sorts of cultures and topography. Nobody has touched this area. And it's another planet. And those jurisdictional disputes is something fresh that hasn't been explored in other LA crime fiction. So I right away had a non-cliche, non-traditional police procedural. I don't know how somebody writes a private eye novel right now. It's been done to death. I don't know how you write a serial killer novel now. When you've got Criminal Minds on TV, they've done 300 serial killer cases, and CSI. What can you bring to a serial killer story that the reader and the viewer haven't seen? That is your obstacle to overcome. And the way you overcome it is to come up with a character that no one's seen before. Start with character. Who is the heroine or hero protagonist of your book? What makes them different? If there's anything about them that's familiar, get rid of it. My heroine, Eve Ronin, has a family. She has brothers and sisters and a mother and a father. You look at most of these detectives, they don't. They're loners. You know, they're all haunted by something dark in their past. My heroine isn't haunted by anything. She's too young to be haunted. You know, you don't have to go down those cliche roads. And then when you actually write, don't use a cliche. Don't use up shit creek without a paddle, needle in a haystack, any phrase you've heard before, cool as a cucumber. No familiar phrases. If you have a story, how the story shapes the character and the character is a reflection of that story. Eve Ronin was intrinsic to the crime of Lost Hills. She came out of that crime.